Euthanasia advocate Sean Davison has been convicted of 3 premeditated murders. He pleaded guilty to all 3 charges. He has been handed an 8-year sentence with 5 years suspended. Davison will spend 3 years under strict house arrest. Our reporter Peladi Satusa has been tracking that story for us, and hopefully she joins us now. Peladi, can you tell us more about the verdict handed down this morning?
Morning. So it was a very quick court appearance. We were actually there thinking that we're there for the pre-trial hearing, so just to sort out the administrative issues before the full trial began. But we were all surprised when, it was announced that Davison had entered into a plea bargain with the state, and effectively we were sitting in his sentencing. So none of the journalists there expected that at all. We were all pretty shocked. So as you rightly said, he pled guilty to all 3 charges, and he won't be serving any time behind bars, but he will be under house arrest for 3 years. Now this means he can carry on going to work. He may go to places of worship, so church, and may go to all medical visits. So quite strict conditions there. He'll also have to do some community service under supervision, but he will not be serving any jail time for those 3 premeditated murder charges.
What impact is this verdict expected to have on the legalization or our legislation specifically in South Africa with regard to euthanasia?
So that's the concern. The NPA say, unfortunately, because the families that they were dealing with of the 3 gentlemen who were implicated in this matter, they were all in agreement that Davison shouldn't be prosecuted, so they couldn't push for any more, or they couldn't push any harder than they already had, and had to, do a bit of give and take in coming to this agreement. But the NPA is saying to us in very strong terms that this is by no means a condonement for this kind of crime, and people shouldn't go out thinking that they'll get away with it or be given as light a sentence as Davison perhaps in future. And Davison himself, if he's convicted of a similar crime within 5 years, he will have to serve that full 8-year sentence. So he's not really off the hook. He'll have to, stay within the lines of those very strict agreements that were reached in court today.
Did we hear any pronouncements from organizations fighting for the legalization of euthanasia in South Africa?
Not yet. We were hoping to speak to Davison himself because, throughout this entire process, he's been saying that he wants to get his side of the story out, but he was reluctant to speak again today. So I'm sure we will hear Dignity SA coming out with a statement very soon. They have been supporting him throughout this entire process. Now, that's the organization he's co-founder of, that is a Right to Die organization. And throughout his entire arrest and his court proceedings, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu wrote a statement of support for euthanasia and for Mr. Davison himself. So I'm sure we'll hear some messages coming out from either of those parties later today.
Did Davison make any mention of why he decided to accept the plea bargain if the NPA's case could not rely on support from the families of those who were euthanized, and essentially, the case was just based on legislation? Was there a specific reason why that plea bargain was accepted, or do we not know yet?
We don't know yet, and it does seem there was a very sort of last-minute backroom dealing with this regard. The NPA saying to us that it was only finalized late last night at about 11 o'clock. There were, some extenuating circumstances that I think led Davison to say, I can either lead a sort of normal life outside of jail, or I could potentially go to jail for a very long time for these crimes. So I think he had to weigh that up and consider his options, considering that he has a family to support, and considering that he's, still a professor at UWC, and he has very important work going on there. So I think he chose the route of least disruption, perhaps, for his life, even though this does come with a very serious criminal record, and this conviction will stick for quite some time to come.
And Davison has been outspoken in the past. Could his hesitance to speak today possibly be related to a part of that plea bargain preventing him from speaking about euthanasia?
Definitely, because, before we went into court, there was a sort of loose agreement that he would speak to all of the media outside afterwards, just to, eventually get his story out. But his lawyer then, sort of 11th hour, said, you know what, no, this is not a good idea. We just can't be speaking to the media at this stage. So I think he had planned to say something, but was advised from a legal standpoint that it's not a good idea right now.
Thank you very much for that update. That was our reporter Pilar Satusa.